What up, though? King of Detroit Hockey is back for another video, my second one. This one I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about how I grew up, where I grew up. I don't think it's common knowledge. As to how I grew up, saying that you're from Detroit, I just want to put a little bit more, add a little bit more context to that. So I grew up in Detroit. I grew up on East Grand Boulevard at Mac. I grew up in a real tough neighborhood, but I had a different family dynamic where my parents were both educators. My dad worked at Northwestern High School. He was an athletic director, head of the health and physical education department at Northwestern High School. My mother was she taught business classes, accounting, and that kind of thing at Denby High School. So when we grew up in Detroit, we weren't allowed to leave our backyard. So my dad, we lived really close to Belle Isle. So my dad, usually in the summers, would load up the bikes and stuff, maybe racquetball. We played a lot of racquetball when I was younger. My dad played racquetball. And we spend the day at Belle Isle because my parents were teachers. They're off in the summer. So we spent a lot of time with my parents, specifically with my father. And in the wintertime, and even back then, we played a lot of hockey in the backyard. My brother and I would just exchange who would play goalie and who would be the person shooting. And we did that all the time. So I'm from a very tough neighborhood, but my parents sheltered us. So again, we weren't allowed to speak in proper English. My mother was big on speaking proper English all the time. We were always corrected. My parents used to take us on these summer vacations because they had the summers off because they were teachers. So we used to go on these trips around. We went to the '84 Olympics, but we didn't just go to California. It was a road trip all the way in all these different states that we stopped in until we got to California, and in all the different states we stopped in on the way back. And my parents split the trip up between, and I think it was to save money, but we used to stay at KOAs. We had a tent. We used to put on top of the van, that big thing they used to put on top of the van. We had a tent in there, so my brother and I and my dad used to, set up the tent. So we had stuff to do camping with, and then we'd spend the other half of the trip kind of in different motels, hotels along the way. And my brother and I were always looking for one that had a swimming pool. You know how that's important to kids, right? Pool is important for a hotel. So that's kind of how we grew up. And so my parents used to collect these pennants from every state we would be in or visiting, and every place that we would visit if they had pennants. So my mother would put these pennants up in our den and constantly tell us, you see, there's a world outside of Detroit. So not to get caught up in what was going on in the hood, because we had been outside of that and regularly outside of that. So we shouldn't. Her thought process in that was to kind of remind us that it was that we weren't just from the ghetto and in the ghetto and never left the ghetto. I don't know, but it was a good thing. But at any rate, so growing up that way, I was from the city, and I had my experiences in the city for sure by going to public school on the other side of town. I'm from the east side. I went to school on the west side because my dad worked at Northwestern High School, so he wanted us close to him. So we went to Woodward Elementary School, and I went to McMichael Middle School. Those were very tough schools, and that's where I got my stripes with this hood stuff for sure, because everybody in my class, nobody had two parents. I remember we used to go around and they would take who do you stay with? They would take at the beginning of the year, you had to fill out these cards to get I don't know, but they will ask you who you stay with, your mom or your dad. And it was a common question because nobody had two parents. So I remember when I was in the sixth grade, and the teacher came around to me, it was 35 kids in the classroom, and the teacher came around to me after she asked her, who you live with, mom or dad? Who you live with, mom or dad? So I'm the last person she gets to, and she said, who you live with? And I said, my mom, which I did, but I actually live with my mom and my dad. But I didn't want to say anything because I'd have been different, and I didn't want a child was trying to fit in. So my dad had to come up to school for some kind of parents meeting, and he was close because he was right next. Northwestern was really close to Woodward, and he would actually just walk over if there was any kind of parent meeting or if I got in trouble. So he walked over there, and the teacher was like, "I thought he said he lived with his mom." So my dad was like, "What? No, we both live together, like we're married." So she was like, "Oh, why don't you just say that?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, everybody else live with their mama, so I said the same thing." But again, it was just a different. Again, that's even different growing up in that situation because, I don't know. Not everybody, like I said, had two parents, so it was some real street characters, some real gangster stuff going on around there that I had to get through and navigate. So I learned how to navigate. But every day I would go home with my dad. We would go up to his high school, hang out until he got off of work, and he would take us back on the east side. So all of my friends lived on the other side of town. So I never really had like a neighborhood kind of feel. I just sort of like, I knew them, but they lived on the other side of town. So it's not like we went over each other's houses and stuff like that, So I kind of grew up kind of isolated at my house. And, when we would go play hockey or go to Belle Isle or a myriad of other places we may go to. So again, like that was my experience. I mean, I did have to deal with being in the streets. I had some cousins that were a little bit street, but we didn't really get involved with it at all. My dad kept us from it, sheltered us from it, and we kind of lived in another world. Even though we were in that community, we just didn't live that way. We didn't eat bad. I didn't eat a lot of fried foods. My mother was a big health person, eating healthy foods, vegetables, and I mean, I just didn't eat like everybody else did that was around me. So again, like, it made me kind of an outlier growing up. I'm in a community where everybody speaks improper English, and I had to speak proper English, so that was peer pressure. And then I would go to play hockey, and I had to fit in with the white dudes. So I had to understand how to roll in that environment too. So I grew up being able to put on my hood hat and being able to put on my hockey hat. So I had to be able to fit into both. Eventually I just started being one person, and I didn't really I didn't care how I fit in. So going to Jack Adams, back to Jack Adams, where I started playing, I started out playing as a goalie, and like I said, it was a predominantly black program sponsored by the Police Athletic League, and everybody had a lot of fun. It was a lot of kids involved, and then we had banquets every year. I remember, people will remember this from Jack Adams, but the Blue Pigs would always play. That was a bunch of cops that had like a little band, and we had that at our banquets every year. We had, they gave away trophies and all that kind of stuff. But that was the beginning of it, was playing at Jack Adams, and it was like everybody was born like around the 70s, so it was a lot of like real, real like against the establishment kind of stuff. Like you could tell by my name. My name was Akil. My brother's name was Asim. Down at Jack Adams, it was DeCondi and Eckendal and Ibn, and I mean, it was a lot of Cedric and Wallace Alameen. I mean, it was just a lot of Black Panther type of environment, but we were playing hockey, which is crazy. But so anyway, that was the beginning of it, and then playing on the Rockies was my first time playing travel hockey, and I moved up to play from 8. I was playing with 9-year-olds, and I was 8. And that was my first time playing up. But we had probably the most undisciplined team ever. Most of the time, we were taking a lot of penalties. Everybody was fighting. Everybody would get called the N-word and take that as an opportunity to just go out and fight. So looking back on it, it wasn't really that the other teams were racist, but we were just dirty. We just played dirty. A lot of hitting, taking too many steps, running people. As I got older, that you can't do that. You play in the OHL and you do that, you'll be fighting a lot. You can't play like that unless that's what you want to do. So when we were younger, that was how everybody had this, like I told you, everybody was from that what do you call that? The Black Panther Party, real militant black people. So everybody thought that it was us against the white man. And we were going out there playing dirty, running guys, thinking that they were racist, and they really weren't. But at the time, we thought they were. And when you run somebody like that, as I got older, I'm like, that's going to piss anybody off. You can't do that, And if you do, that's going to make, if you run somebody from behind or you just run people, period, they're going to get pissed off. And the first thing they're going to do is call you a name. And sometimes it would be an N-word, but it wasn't like it came from nowhere. It was because of that kind of play. As I got older, I understood that. But when we were younger, we played real reckless and dirty. And I tried to explain that to a friend of mine, but he had a hard time grasping that that's the way we played. And as I got older, I realized that I couldn't play like that unless I wanted to fight all the time. And I didn't mind fighting, but I didn't want to fight, especially as I got older, all the time. It was a tough job, and my hat goes off to those guys that could do that on a regular basis. By the way, that makes me remember the guy I told you in my last video that was so tough in the United Hockey League. His name was Ralph. I think it was Ralph Engelstad was his last name. I don't know if it was Ralph or not, because I'm confusing the guy that ran this hockey arena in North Dakota. But anyway, I thought his name was something like that, Engelstad. Mel Engelstad or something like that. But I think that was him. But it's levels to that fighting stuff, man. And he was a tough guy in the U-Haul. He was completely one of the toughest guys in the league, if not the toughest guy. But when you move up that other level, you still got to be able to maintain that, and it's levels to it. And when I saw him move up, he was not tough at all. Nobody was worried about him at all. Guys are handling him at that next level. That's why sometimes you'll get a guy in the American League, like a Dennis Bovey, who is a really tough guy, tough guy in the American League, but he couldn't do it in the NHL. He couldn't make it as an NHL tough guy. Even though he was tough, it's another level. You got to fight Probert and Kosher and those animals. And, some guys can make that jump and other guys can't, and there's other guys that could. Like, I remember Andre Waugh, and he played in Tampa Bay, but I played against him in the American League. He was pretty tough, and he was able to move up and be tough, up in the NHL as well. But anyway, I just digress. But that was the guy I remember, just to make it just levels to that fighting stuff. But yeah, so I grew up, pretty sheltered environment, and education was important in my house because my parents were teachers, and everybody in my family. My dad had a master's degree. My mother had a master's degree. Education was probably more important than anything else, which is kind of probably why I didn't go to the OHL right away. I could have gone to the OHL, but I was always taught to go to college and have an education. And thinking back, I should have never done that. I should have went straight to the O, because I didn't even like school. I didn't like going to class. I didn't like it. I love playing the OHL, and I probably should have done it earlier, made it help my chances earlier, but you live and you learn. And the way I was brought up, education was important. My parents pushed it hard, so that's why I ended up, taking the route that I ended up going, which was to play junior and go to college, USHL, and go to college instead of playing in the OHL earlier. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my background that people didn't know, and some people that or around. My buddy Drake, he would know, but a lot of people that I played with, they didn't know. Nobody really ever came to my house. I would spend a night at everybody else's house, but we didn't really have too many people over in our house. In fact, I don't think I had any of. If you can comment in my comments, if you did spend a night with me and you were not black, then that would be interesting, because I don't think that happened. Not that it, it's just because I think of where we lived, and my parents being a little bit concerned about the culture shock that could have possibly happened. But anyway, it was a good experience. I had a fun childhood growing up, very different childhood, learning how to move in different environments, and then that'll bring me to my next video, which I'll probably be talking about when I got the opportunity to go to University of Liggett. But yeah, not your everyday story about growing up playing hockey, right? Wouldn't think anybody from that neighborhood would be playing hockey. I swear it's probably nobody still from that neighborhood ever to even do it. You would never see anybody in that neighborhood playing hockey in that background. You wouldn't even expect to see that. And again, you wouldn't expect my parents to be so hard on us about education and how we spoke, and not not becoming where we lived. So I'm doing this YouTube thing, so I got to remember to please like and subscribe, comment in my comment section if you have some, if you're from around that area and you remember a lot of that stuff. It's fun to catch up. I've gotten some comments from some guys I haven't seen in a long time. I love to hear from everybody. I think we had one big, huge hockey family. We're still always going to be a part of that hockey family. I know hockey's in my blood. It'll never leave. It never will. It never will. And it'll always be there. And I'm sure a lot of guys feel the same way. So I'm out.